I'm going to be completely honest with you. This coffee mug is actually empty, but it seemed totally necessary to have such a cozy prop because we are going to be talking about my favorite thing, and that is books. Today I want to share my September reads, reviews, ratings, all the good things, and also my October TBR. So if that is something you're keen to see, grab yourself a real cuppa and let's get into the video. All right, starting off with all the books I read in September, which once again, there was a lot. I had 2 left over from the month before that dragged into at least like the first week or so of September, and that was the Fairvale Ladies Book Club and A Court of Mist and Fury. And I did review both of those in my previous month's book wrap up, and the rating that I gave them, I believe, is pretty well going to stay the same because there wasn't too much change happening in the last bit of the book. However, update, I will say this. I did rate A Court of Mist and Fury 5 stars, and I also rated A Court of Thorns and Roses 5 stars. But now that I'm getting into the series a bit more, I think I was a little bit too excited about my rating of A Court of Thorns and Roses because it ended on such a great note. I don't think it was a 5-star overall because there were lots of parts of the book that were maybe like 4.5 for me. So I think if we just leave it as a 4.5 overall, I think that kind of encapsulates the entire vibe. But definitely A Court of Mist and Fury was a 5-star read, no doubt. So that's how I began the month. And then my next 2 books I don't actually have with me because they're both library ones that I have since returned. The first one out of those 2 was A Room with a View by Andre Ackerman. I have never heard of this book before. I literally just came across it in the new release section. I liked the cover and decided to pick it up. I think it really helped that it had big font and wasn't too thick, so it really seemed achievable for me. The premise is that you have a middle-aged man and woman. They are strangers and just happen to meet in the waiting room of the New York City court system while waiting out jury selection and strike up a bit of a conversation. One thing leads to the next, and they're having lunch and coffee together and continuing to converse and share different aspects of their lives, and you can tell there's kind of a little bit of attraction. And each chapter of this book is a different day of the week, and I think it doesn't go for a full week. It maybe goes from Monday to Friday or Saturday. And the big thing that sort of kept me reading is they are both married to obviously different people, and you can see this like attraction, and they're kind of like dancing around the subject, but it's leaving you to ask, are these 2 going to have an affair with each other? Because that is how things look like they're traveling. For me, I found it really interesting. I feel like it was very much of a palate cleanser because the characters, the setting, the plot, even the writing style was very different to some of the other things that I've been reading lately. I really liked the writing style. I feel like it was really just frank and to the point, and the characters were sort of a little bit abrupt, if you will, and it just made it quite interesting to me. It was a quick and easy read, and altogether I'm probably going to rate it maybe a 3.5, pushing it to a 4, but I think we'll leave it as a conservative 3.5. The next book I read, I really loved. It's called Lost and Lassoed by Lila Sage, and truly I picked it up because I was intrigued by the cover, which is, as you can see, very cute and aesthetic. And I honestly loved everything about this book. We've got small town, Midwest, on a ranch, like sort of country type vibes. We've got your enemies to lovers, small town romance, somewhat forbidden romance because it's your best friend's older brother, dual character narration. I love the character voices. They're 2 very different characters, somewhat Grump and Sunshine, but not in like a cheesy way, because I've read a couple of Grump and Sunshines where I've just not liked it. The Sunshine's been too sunny and it's just been like overall cliche, but I feel like this one did it really well. And I liked also the fact that it was the male Grump who started to get feelings for the girl first. It was very spicy, I will say this, but for me, it was just an easy and fun read, and I'm going to rate it as a very easy 4.5 actually. Next up, we have some books that I actually have physical copies of. This one, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, was one that my sister Shale lent me, and I really liked the premise behind this. It is sort of 4 interconnected but like individual-ish short stories of different characters who come into this cafe in Tokyo, and if you sit in a particular chair and you order a coffee, you can go back in time, but you can only like revisit, if you want to, someone who has already come into the cafe. So you can't go back in time to the cafe and see someone who's not been there. So there's kind of a lot of rules around this situation of going back in time. One of them being you have to finish the moment before and finish your coffee before it gets cold, otherwise you'll be cursed essentially. And so each of these 4 characters want to go back in time and revisit a loved one for different reasons. They're all quite sad, but there's sort of like a glimmer of hope at the end of each story. I really like this storyline. I think it's very unique and very heartwarming. However, what I will say is that it was translated from Japanese into English, and so I feel like a lot has been lost in translation, and it made it like a little bit clunky to read. For me, I also found it difficult because all the characters' names are Japanese characters, and a lot of them start with like the same letter, like a K or a H, and I found myself oftentimes getting confused about who was who. I would say that this is a good book. It's very interesting and unique storyline, but I didn't really feel compelled to pick it up and read it. And I think because of that translation, it just wasn't necessarily doing it for me. So I'm going to probably rate this as 3.5 overall. Next up, we have You'll Be the Death of Me by Karen M. McManus. Very similar to the other books that she's written. It's just your classic YA crime thriller, a bit of a whodunit. We have 3 deviating character perspectives, and these 3 characters skip school for a day but unintentionally run into a crime scene with a dead body, and I guess it's just the backstory of them uncovering why this character, who they all know and are like all weirdly connected to, has been killed, and them uncovering the killer, and they all have their own secrets to hide along the way. It was just a very easy, fast-paced read, and I'm probably going to rate this one an easy 4 out of 5. This one I just randomly picked up about halfway through, or maybe even 3/4 of the way through the month, Where Hope Comes From by Nikita Gill. It's a book of poetry. I was obviously very attracted to the cover, and I generally like reading poetry. I'm about halfway through this, and honestly, I think it's going to be hard for me to continue pressing through because it seems like all of these poems are around like the emotional turmoil of COVID times. And I know that that was like a very stressful and isolating time for people, and I can understand why poetry would be birthed from that time, but it just feels weird to be looking back on it and just having an entire book of poems dedicated to this time where I feel like we're just all trying to move on from it essentially. So it feels like I'm being thrust back into just like an uncomfortable part of the past that I kind of just want to forget and grow from. So I don't know. I'm not sure if this will be a continue on. One thing I will say about it is that I really like how it does have some watercolor artwork somewhat throughout. So I think that that's like a little bit of an interesting feature. And I might even just flick through and see if I can find some poems throughout that are not necessarily related to the pandemic, but are just about hope in a general sense. I don't know that I can necessarily give this a rating because I'm only halfway through and I'm not particularly liking it. For me, it's feeling like maybe a 2.5 at best. I wouldn't recommend reading it personally. The Opt-Out Family by Erin Lochner. Not sure if that's how you pronounce her last name. I would say that this is probably a must read for any parents, particularly if you have young children. Obviously, technology just pervades our everyday life, and it is a big decision of how much or to what extent or if any you're going to expose your kids to technology. And it kind of brought up a lot of things to me, not only about technology use within our home, how I use it, how I intend to expose Hunter to it, if at all, and in what capacity. But also I think it raised a lot of questions to me as a teacher about technology in the classroom and what benefit it can actually bring to the kids. And as I'm going back into teaching next year, I think it's really going to reframe how I approach teaching and the ways that I will or won't integrate technology into my classroom. What I will say is that there is probably a bit of overlap between this one and Stolen Focus. I would say, however, holistically, I like Stolen Focus better because I think it talks about a lot more than just technology, but I did still get a lot of insight and inspiration from this book, and I think that it's definitely a must read for parents, and I'm probably going to rate it as maybe a 4.5. Okay, my last book for September was the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, and I was a little bit apprehensive going into this because I bought the first 3 in this series and I did not really like the Pumpkin Spice Cafe. I found it very cliche. I found that it was missing the magic of like that small community. I was hoping for Gilmore Girls vibes and it really wasn't delivering. The romance between the characters was a little bit awkward, and I had heard that the series had gotten better throughout, and I'm happy to announce that that is certainly true. This is your good girl, bad boy / womanizing boy type romance, sort of friends to lovers vibes. And I will say the small town aesthetic is hitting a lot harder in this book. The romance seems a lot more believable. The spice factor is like just on a whole other level. And I was like a little bit concerned that the fact that the main premise or storyline in this was that there were like secret messages and a scavenger hunt happening that's like forcing these 2 characters together and creating this budding romance. I thought that that would be like really cliche, but it ended up being super cute. So I actually enjoyed this one so much more than the first one. I can't remember what I rated the first one. I think it may have been something like a 3.5, and I'm probably going to rate this one as a 4. So I read 7 books completely in September and finished off 2. Now, during the course of the month, maybe it was like halfway through, I hit up the library and I picked up this one. I just couldn't help myself. It was also brand new. I think I was the only person who read it. Now I am a little bit of the way through, not quite half, maybe a third of the way through. I'm not going to talk about this or rate it thus far because I think that I just want to finish it and have it as an October book and then talk about it in my next month book review and TBR, but I just couldn't help myself. The second one left off on such a good note that I had to find out what was happening in the third book. Now I know last month I consulted the TBR jar / aesthetic teacup and picked out a couple of books for my reading, but considering that I've already got a massive book, which is A Court of Wings and Ruin, to plow through this month, I also anticipate that I'm going to be picking up a fair few from the library over the course of the month that are very spring vibes. I may only select one from my TBR jar. So I have already made my spring book list, and I don't think that I will be able to get all of these from the library, but some that I think the library is likely to have include Anne of Green Gables, The People You Meet on Vacation, maybe Enchanted April, definitely The Secret Garden, Weather Girl, Bridgerton I already have here actually, Not sure about Garden Spells or Sinister Spring. They do have Elodie's Library of Second Chances and Escape to Honeysuckle Hall and Beach Read and Emily Wilde's the third one in the season. So there is a heap that they have that are kind of on my spring book list. So what I'm going to do is just set aside some time and space so that I can inevitably go down and borrow those, because we know that I hit up the library, I find some good things, I already have stuff going at home, but then I see them at the library and I just have to borrow them because what if they're not there next time? So I just need to anticipate that that's going to happen. And what I'm going to do is I'm only going to pick one from my own stash for my October TBR, and let's see what that is going to be. It is The Art of Home. Be right back. Is this cheating that I put a coffee table book in my TBR list? I don't know about you guys, but I love to use books as decor, but I also want them to be practical and for me to read them. And I have a tendency with like a book like this that is really, you know, an aesthetic placement in my house to just sit there and maybe I flick through and look at the pictures, but I never actually read. Now, obviously, this one does have just a lot of pages that are mostly just images, but there are plenty of sections throughout that have, you know, little overviews and tips and things, not in terms of designing, decorating, etc. your house. And I'm hoping that it's going to give me some fresh spring inspiration in terms of moving things around, having a reshuffle, redecorate, maybe a little bit of, you know, an op shop finding when my low buy year ends, if there are things that I want to strategically source to spruce up my house. I think that this is beneficial that I selected one that's going to have very limited reading, considering that I am quite optimistic about my library haul that will inevitably be happening. So this is kind of a watch this space for my next month video. But nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me today and talking all things books. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below for more weekly cozy content. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys.